Welcome back to the channel. I'm Stav, and today is part 2 of Keeping Up with the Malaka's wiring edition. If you guys remember, on part 1, we talked about all the things we're going to be doing, all the sensors we're going to be adding, some of them that we're going to be removing and repurposing. Today we have an Excel sheet that I'm going to get into and talk about exactly what we're going to, how we're going to add them, why we're doing it this way, what's the benefit of doing it versus the way we've done it, or even just RS3 shops do it. We have a lot of things to talk about. I have a lot of things to show you guys. So let's get started because we have a lot of questions to answer and not a lot of time. So let's get started. What I asked George to do is he pulled off the intake manifold, and he took it off because he knows how he had it all bolted in here. One of the problems with the R32, on top of it being a 24 valve, is that to be able to get to the injector harness, you have to pull the intake manifold, and in most cases need to pull the front end, or at least tilt it towards you. I really wanted to fix the old harness that I made, which is the first thing I actually made ever when it comes to wiring on the old harness. So one of the reasons, and we didn't have any issues with the harness, it ended up working the entire time. Mind you, I'm missing a connector here because I had to borrow it for the new connector. I ran short or lost it, whatever happened. But basically, I had no idea what gauge wiring to go with. I didn't know about the charts online where you could find, what's the best sizing for injectors. And one of the things I did and made a mistake here is I used all the way up to 14 gauge wiring on this harness. Now, for any of you guys who know about wiring, probably laughing while you watch this, most people with, any type of fuel injector harness, because these are not high amp pulling systems, use anywhere between 20 to 22. Usually 20 for the power, 22 for the ground. I ended up using 14, which is something they use for fans and fuel pumps. So this harness is really thicker than it definitely needs to be. It's definitely overkill for what we want to do. So what we did was we ended up making a whole new harness. One of the nice parts is because we're using a smaller gauge, that we're able to use a smaller Deutsch connector, as you see right there. Like it's like literally, a third smaller, which is nice because again, we're trying to make this as smooth and streamlined as possible. We ended up using 20 gauge for the red powers and 22 gauge for all of the ground signals that comes from the ECU. What's nice, since we're actually making a whole harness from scratch, I ended up copying all the wires. So for example, cylinder 6 is running a white wire. So on the harness right here, we'll be able to match it up when it's in, so we know exactly that it's pinned correctly because we're matching all the colors. Just another thing to double check, because we won't be able to actually get to the injector to ohm it out. So just by having the connector in, we'll know just by the color code that everything is wired correctly and make it easier down the line. That's the whole point of making these harnesses, is to make it nicer every single time we make it. Just for an example, if this harness, because of the 14 gauge wiring, when you measure out the fattest part of this harness, it's 15.7 millimeters right here, where the fattest part of this harness is 4.7. So it's literally 2/3 smaller than the original harness we made. We definitely have better crimps, higher quality wiring. The first time around, we just used whatever we had available. And, I ended up buying this tool, which is made by IWISS. Really cheap $30 tool you can get on Amazon, but man, the crimps are really nice. It's making a high quality crimp, and everything's coming out a lot nicer. And that's the whole point, because the last thing you want to do is have one of these pins come out, a cylinder run lean, not firing, and then we blow a motor because of a 20-cent connector. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up and show you some of the things we're working on. Now let's get to the ECU. Woo, look at all this wiring. So this is actually one of the old harnesses. This is an OEM Rs3 harness, 5-cylinder harness, untouched, just basically removing all the sheathing and just checking all the connectors. I depinned this, so basically I can go back and check how the wires are run, if it's tapped anywhere, and really see what's going on underneath the harness, especially since I'm going to make a whole new one, and we had an extra one that came out of a crash car. So this is pretty pretty invaluable, especially if we run into an issue. I can kind of like trace things back. This is how the Syvecs unit works. It's going to be bolted here. I've showed you this guys before. And then this is the adapter harness, adapter box that goes to the adapter harness that goes into the Syvecs ECU. Now, what we plan on changing compared to, let's say, how every single person who runs Syvecs, and let's say if you want to add a 5-bar map sensor, turbo speed, coolant pressure in your motor, and anything else that you really want to add, like flex fuel. This is a, for example, a old turbo speed harness. It's a 3-wire weather pack, 1.5 millimeter amp seal, but that's not the point. You know, basically you have 3 pins here, and what people do is, you know, like let's say you have 3 wires. The green is input, the black wire is ground, and this orange tan color is the 5-volt. Well, instead of going into the OEM harness here and pinning it and making it all work, or removing something that Syvecs no longer uses, what 99.9% except for us use is they go directly into the Syvecs ECU unit. And usually when this is in the engine bay, it's really done because of convenience. Easier to, you know, figure out. Just, you know, remove C35 or C12 and just put the pin in there. The problem is when you start adding 5 or 6 sensors and you got to tap 5 volts 5 different times, you got to tap, you know, the ground 5 different times, and it just makes it very ugly, and like, just, you know, when it's in the engine bay, it's not exactly the nicest way, and you really don't want to start cutting into the original harness. That's not really the ideal way, especially on a, you know, high powered unit like this. This is, you know, so many things can be, you know, affected by just a bad crimp or bad connector. You want to make this as nice as possible. So what we plan on doing is removing and making we bought a whole new connector, which is kind of crazy because Bosch is the, you know, the maker of this ECU, and they don't the original ECU and the connector, and they don't even sell this connector. They don't even sell this. They say that it's not even available. Luckily, with a little bit of research and searching on eBay, I was able to find one of these in the UK and China. I believe the one I bought from the UK is actually from China. Let me show you guys here. You know, what's the name? Our new connector. Now I've gone ahead and started pinning, and some people have asked us some questions on how to remove the old pins. I'm going to go ahead and show you because it's actually really easy and doesn't need any special tools. The only thing you really need is a little bit of patience because this is really fragile. I ended up, when I was learning how to do it on one of the old ECUs, like breaking one of the connectors. So, you know, it takes a little bit of practice, but I'm going to show you guys the easy way and what's required. But as you see, we started pinning out the new harness. I ended up having all the inputs. I have coolant pressure, engine EMAP, a whole bunch of inputs that we talked about in the first video, adding all here. This is all just the input side of the wiring and all wrapped up. And then we have the injectors, the coil packs, all, you know, and everything's going to be color coded. Then we have the throttle body. This is all the wiring for the throttle body. So all really usable. You know, just, you know, we just have the input signal wires on. Once we get this in the car, we're going to run the 5 volts, run everything to where it needs to go. But you know, a lot of figuring out here on the Syvecs ECU. We basically looked at our input outputs that we have set in the ECU. Then we're going to go to, you know, our Excel sheet. Some of this has been provided by Syvecs. Some of it we've added onto it because, you know, things change for us on what is exactly our pin out. And it really helps us because we know from the Syvecs ECU to the adapter box what pin to what pin in the harness. And a lot of this I've had to go over and double check and triple check, especially with some of the wiring diagrams I got off All Data and everything. Some things on the All Data side ended up being wrong. The Syvecs stuff was right. And, you know, just basically double checking so that before we start to pin out, I have a good idea of where all the wires go. And, you know, we're not making a mistake or, you know, having to rewire things when it's in the car. We're going to definitely ohm check everything. Once we're done, we've ohm checked every wire that we've put here. So everything has been double checked so that when we get in the car, we know exactly where it's going. We have it labeled. We know which color is for cylinder 3. And like we talked about, we follow that into the ejector. So, you know, and the coil pack so that, you know, when we wire things, it's identical and there's no issues. So let me go ahead and show you guys how to remove the connectors out of one of these housings, these 105 pin, or even the 94 or 91 pin, depending on which ECU you have. They're all relatively the same. I've removed both, so I'm going to go ahead and show you guys so you guys can learn just like I did. So I want to start off by showing you guys, a lot of people have asked for us how to remove the pins in this connector housing. Now this is the 105 pin side. The 94 or 91, whichever one is on your ECU, you know, if R94, I believe it's RS3, 91 if it's a GTI, is exactly the same. So first thing you got to do is, you know, you look at it, all the connectors are in the back, you know, you have to make sure that, you count which connector and pin you're moving. This housing is really delicate. Everything about it is very delicate. So if you trying to remove it, please don't like use excessive force, because that's going to be you'll break one of these pins, and then boom, you got to replace this entire housing. So then you'll get really good at removing all these pins and connectors. But as you see, when you put the connector in, if you see, like, you can see the little silver pins in all of them. There's two ports basically. The bottom port is where the connector goes, the pin, and then the top port is where you actually how you remove it. There's a little lock in there. It'd be very hard to show you, but when the pins go in there, and I'll show you guys. Let's see how well you can see it. I'll show you on this. Let's see, right, how well you can see that. There's actually a little bit of a hump at the end of on one side where the pin goes in, and that's what goes into the lock. So basically when you put the pin inside the housing, there's a little lock inside each and every one of them, and that's what goes over that hump and then allows you not to pull back out. You have to be very careful when you push a pin in. Do not use excessive force. This is very delicate plastic, and all you do is slightly lift on the front. I mean, just barely, and then this pin will come right out. But first, I have the pin. I have this secondary lock halfway out. It goes seats all the way in. You pull that out, because if you don't pull this out first, none of the pins will come out. And well, they will if you put excessive force and break it. But this is just a secondary lock to hold everything in. What you need to do is get yourself a little pick like this, or even a straight one, or something like that. Like a tool like this. This is what I use, because it's very thin and it's pretty strong. But we're gonna remove this pin right here. Let's see. Let's see which pin. I'm gonna push this back in. Wait, let me push this back in real quick. Okay, this is in. Now you see, I'm going to be removing this purple wire. Give it a good tug. It's not coming out, which is just the first pin here in the corner. Probably be easiest to show you right there. I'm going to be removing this pin right here. So what we're going to do is we put this little pick on the front here, and see, don't have to insert it too far in, and you just so again, the pin is on the bottom side of that connector. You could see it when you look inside of it. You see the silver portion. You do not put your pick on that side. You put it right slightly above in the cubicle part right above, and just pick, and you can hear, I don't know if you hear that click, and here it comes out. I mean, it's very simple. You just have a pick slightly in there. You just remove, because you're just trying to remove the little plastic piece above, let's see, above that little hump right there. All it is a little hump there. Their locking tab goes over so that you're not able to back out of it, and you're just lifting it slightly up and pulling it out. So let's try that again. I'll show you guys. Hopefully you guys are able to see this. It does get a little frustrating, because even though I can go through like 10 of them and get them out quick, sometimes on the 11th one it's a little bit of a pain in the butt. What I do, I just come back to that one, because the older they get, the debris older. I mean, the plastic, these are fairly new. These are only on 2-3-year-old cars. But here, I'll show you guys again. Here we go. You see right there the first pin, bam, you get in, comes right out. So that's how you remove it. If you guys have any more questions, I haven't seen a video on how to remove these connectors before, and a few people have actually messaged me asking, because I guess they had some hard time, and I definitely had a hard time removing it my first time. But now that I've been playing with this for a couple weeks, I've gotten a little bit better at it. Still not perfect, but they might even have a tool for this. I don't even know. I have the tool, but I'm not exactly sure which tool it is. But just a basic pick, or a little flathead screwdriver, it'll come out. Just be very delicate and gentle, and it'll come right out. So what I'm going to do, I have the harness about 98% terminated here. I mean, on the ECU side. We're going to throw this now into the glove box and then run the harness into the engine bay. This harness is extremely long, as we talked about, because we made this much longer than we needed to, so that we can cut it down, and then once we get it inside the engine bay, we can basically cut off anything excessive that we don't need. The last thing I want to do is make the harness too short, and then we still have to solder and crimp, which is kind of defeats the whole purpose of doing it this way anyway. We could have just extended the original harness, but as you've shown, we've been pinning out this whole new connector with all new ECU. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the pinout of the Syvecs ECU. So basically, this is like a mock-up of how the engine, the ECU would be in the glove box, and then the harness is connected from the engine side, not the body side, as you see. and then I have all the terminals here for, you know, the Syvecs adapter. So, you know, for example, you know, let's see, C4 on this ECU should be sensor ground. There should only be one pin on the sensor ground that reaches continuity. So one thing we did with this top of the line Harbor Freight multimeter is I actually cut off the connector because the pin would never read, because this hole for the amp seal is so small, it would never read into the harness. So I basically, and you'd have to sit there with like a paper clip or something to read continuity. So basically what I did is I soldered a paper clip on there, and we're now able to put this inside the hole. And okay, I put that in the wrong one too. So let's say C2, C3, C4, put it into C4, and then here we are, we have the wires for all the sensor grounds. Only one of these pins should have continuity, because on this one terminal, pin 11 in the OEM connector should have continuity. So because everything's a mess here, let's see, we go one, let's see, boom, nothing, and then this one should have it, boom. Yes, so exactly like I thought, C11, one pin has continuity, and we're gonna go one by one, all the way down to all the inputs, the outputs, and just check it. So like, you know, so now that we know that one of these have continuity, the other three should have continuity on pin C2. And let's see, C2, first one has continuity. Not sure how well you see that. Read that right there, like boom, continuity 1, 2, and then 3. And then of course to double check and make sure that I'm 100% correct, the last sensor ground should not be reading because that's on pin 11. Your ECU actually has actually 4 sensor grounds, but as you see we have only 3 on this pin. The 4th one actually goes to the throttle body, which is dedicated to the throttle body. It's actually a thicker gauge wiring in your OEM harness. So I'm only testing the ones off of the the ones that go to your normal sensors, because again, 3-pin sensors, you need sensor power input, and even though you have 3 here and you have 12 sensors, usually what people do is, like, let's say if one of these you have 5 sensors in a very tight area, you'll take one of these and then split off the sensor grounds into 5 different wires. Either you crimp them, solder them, however you like to do it, and then make it easier and smoother the transition. You don't want to run these sensors to like the earth of the ECU of the body, or they consider the ground to the body. You want to run all these grounds to the ECU, because the ECU has ways to filter out any excessive noise, any excessive voltage. It's definitely better to run this through the ECU, and that's the proper way to do it, just like the factory sensors had it. So we're not trying to change anything up. I think Bosch knows more than us, so we're going to be running it the exact same way. Just going to go pin by pin and show you guys, exactly, what we need to test to make sure it works on the body harness side and the engine harness side. Because I already checked the body harness when we did the extension. Checked wire by wire, made sure that all the pins were 100% correct. But of course, you always want to go through and double check your engine side, so that before we throw this into the glove box, that we know that everything is 100% correct, and then we just start pinning. You really can't put a price on double and triple checking things, because when you start, when everything's through the body, behind the dash, it becomes very difficult to troubleshoot this kind of stuff. And like just an extra hour or even 2 hours could save you 20 hours of trying to figure out what's going on when you're having issues. So the best thing is to do that, document it. Even though I'm putting this on paper, we also have an Excel sheet that we have fully documented, but this will just be able to be used now for double checking, and then I'll add that if anything is wrong, we'll change the Excel sheet. So now we got a lot of work. Let's keep going. So the harness is completely done, guys. We're done. Ready to start this car up and let's go driving. I'm just joking. So we ended up installing the harness on. We ran the harness through the through the firewall. What's nice is we're gonna be able to put this plastic cover back on and completely hide the harness, unlike before where it was sitting up here. Just by without the heat shrinking and all that. Like, again, we have all the zip ties just to run it and make it smoother, but the harness is exactly half the thickness of the original harness that we ran through here, and that of course is without the heat shrinking on it on both measurements. So We talked about running the injector harness, putting it right here. Again, you know, we're just roughly running it just to see where it is in place. And we're going to put the harness disconnection right here. So if we ever need to disconnect the injectors, for example, if we want to crank the motor up, you know, if we get oil pressure in the motor without starting, we can just disconnect it right here and boom. Of course, we could, you know, do that through the ECU, but it is nice to have a manual in case, again, we need to shut it off for any reason. I have all the wiring here, and now we're going to start to cut this down and figure out exactly where everything goes. So, yeah, I mean, we're making progress. Definitely one step forward, 25 step back. But definitely making progress, so let's keep going, guys. Right now we're crimping down all the injector harness wires. What I really like about these type of connectors, these are, I think they call them DTM connectors. Instead of being like an open barrel, you actually need a special tool just like this one. It's about 30 bucks. I got this from Amazon, but it really does a nice job because, you know, I mean, if you do a proper job on an open barrel, it does a good job also, but like putting out a lot of tension on this, and this is not uncrimping. What's also really nice about this whole setup is that when you do crimp them, they end up, because of the tool, I'm not sure how well you could see it, but it has a, what do you call, 4 teeth inside this, so it actually crimps the connector from 4 different sides, putting extreme tension on this this crimp, makes it a lot nicer. So, you know, just basically I like using them, and then it goes into the Deutsch connector because those are you know, I like using them because they're high quality stuff. So I mean, it's pretty easy. You just put this in, put it in there. I mean, you got to make sure that, you know, there's a little pinhole right here inside of all of them, and you see that the copper wire is exposed in there, so you see that you can actually see copper versus just seeing the silver, the nickel plated on this. So, you know, you make sure that the wire has gone all the way through and reached, and you push it through, and then, you know, just give it a one good crimp. I always try to go second just in case I'm weak, and then boom, completely good crimp. You know, the last thing you want to do is have one of these crimps come loose and one injector is not firing and you toast the motor because of it. So, you know, that's just, you know, that's why I like using these. So, you know, we'll do it again, show you guys real quick. This is not a factory connector. I mean, they should be, because they're actually better than factory connectors, because they, you know, they're double sealed on to make sure that water does not get into them. So, you know, you just cut about 5 millimeters off. What I do is I like to take it off and just line it up on the outside to make sure that it completely goes through, and trim down. I like to make them a little bit longer than I have to, and then trim them down as I need. This one happens to be exactly perfect. So, you know, just, you know, you get it right to the line. You see the copper still through that little pinhole, and then go ahead, give it a crimp, and yeah, I mean, I really like these. I wish I could get these for everything, but of course, you know, between engines and different style connectors, you need to, you know, be an expert at 9,000 different type of crimps, so you can't use them for everything, unfortunately. So yeah, you know, these, if I could, I like to buy these. They're a few more dollars than the regular open barrel, and especially if you got the right tool like I have. Again, it's not the $17,000 tool, it's not Snap-on, but off Amazon Prime you can get these. I believe they call them DTM terminals. I think, maybe I'm wrong, but either way, if you need them, hit me up for the link. I'll give you the link for them, because this is what I use, and you know, we use this on the original harness and had really good luck with it, and you know, we didn't really have any pins or terminals come loose, but you know, it's always nice to, you know, use good quality stuff, and that's kind of what we try to use here. Of course, we buy this from, like, you know, online from like MotorSports or ProWire. You know, just try to keep things consistent. So that's how it goes, guys. Just want to give you guys a heads up, getting the injector harness terminated, and you know, we want to leave it here because it'll be hidden, easy access, and then we'll start, you know, once we get everything terminated and we get the car running, we'll go back and clean this all up and really show you how nice this harness is going to come out, because it's actually coming out a lot better than I thought it would, because this is my first time, and don't take this as an instructional, but you know, take this as a learning curve, because you know, this time around is a lot better than the first time we did it, because you know, the first time I was actually, a lot of things were afterthoughts, like, oh, where are we going to put this? Oh, we'll do this, you know, we already had a heat shrink, and we're like, oh, we forgot to add the alternator wire, this. Everything is kind of well thought of here. I constantly like keep that in my mind when I'm doing this, because that's really what makes a good harness compared to a bad harness, or like somebody who's really good at this, is just the difference in planning. Planning is everything, and crimping is the easy part. So yeah, let's keep going, guys. The injector harness is completely done. Again, remember, we're not wrapping anything right now. We're just going to be doing testing. We have all 6 pins, and then the 2 red wires are the power. I showed you guys how to crimp those. And then what we're going to do right here is another Deutsch connector for the fans. This is the ground control from the ECU for the relays. So you're going to make this nice, easy. Actually, they make these in black, so I actually might buy those. But for right now, it doesn't change anything with the pins and the connectors. But we will shorten up this injector harness as we see when we put the manifold. I made it a little longer than it needs to be. But again, we don't have the manifold on. I want to get all this on before we get the manifold so that we can, see, because it'll be really easy to figure out where the map and the IAT go. But as you see, we have a lot of these 3-pin sensors, 3-pin pressure switches, which goes on the map. We got, actually goes on the oil pressure, the coolant pressure. We have one on the intake manifold. And then the fuel pressure uses the same exact sensor. And, no biggie, no big deal about them, but there are different ones that they make, and I wanted to show you guys right here. My first time I made these the connectors on the first harness, I ended up using this style, which is like an old Delphi Packard style. But what happens is, if you ever have to de-pin them, they're not removable. Basically, you have to cut all 3 connectors out and start to re-pin them. On the new style, which looks like this, it's called a GT150. I mean, you can buy these on B MotorSports, or anybody basically sells them because they're so common. All basically pressure switches use these 3-pin style, what's the name? So, it's nice because if you ever put the wrong pin in the wrong hole, basically you can remove it, pop this silver cap off and repin them. Or if you're going to, again, test it like how we're testing, and then have to go to the next step where you guys are going to put the, the rake hem heat sheathing on it, or whatever, it's nice because it's removable. The last thing you want to do is actually make a mistake here and then have to redo everything. And sometimes you just don't have any extra length. So definitely nice to get this one, and they're the exact same price. So make sure you buy the right ones, and I'll show you guys here how we crimp them. So this is, we made a lot of progress. I know it doesn't look like much. We ran everything into the engine bay. I ended up pulling everything out and just tightening up the bay. We wired in the throttle body, as you guys see here. We twisted up the wire. This is not necessarily a concentric twist. That's, those are a lot nicer. Something I don't know how to do yet, but I hope to learn in the future. But I twist up the wire because it makes it easier, and then makes everything a little bit tighter, and it's not just moving around and getting caught on things. So we have the 82mm Bosch throttle body wired in. We have the the oil pressure, coolant pressure. Now, as you see, we bought these. Like normally when you wire one of these 3-pin sensors, this is kind of how the top is, and I think that looks pretty ugly. I don't like the way they look. Again, all the pins aren't fully seated because we're going to remove everything. But as you see here, we bought these little 90-degree adapters for the coolant pressure. I really like that. I think it cleans it up, makes it look nice, then actually directs where you want the wire. We have the oil temp sensor wired in. We have the GM IAT like I showed you guys. That's in. Fuel injectors are wired in. We have the harness run this way. Again, this is not a fully cleaned up harness, but there's a lot of improvements here over the OEM harness that we used before. All new wires. We have the cam sensors wired in. We still have to wire in the crank sensor, the 2 knock sensors, the turbo speed, all the shielded wire. I have that hidden back here just so it's out of my way. We're going to be using, we use shielded wire for the crank and the knock sensors because you definitely want to remove any interference in the signal. But yeah, it's coming out way nicer than I thought it was going to come out. It's also a lot smaller, the harness, actually. When you measure the harness, let's say right here on the factory harness, without the shielding on, it's like 19.4 millimeters thick without the the actual heat shielding, that the tape that they put on. And this harness, even with the 9 added inputs, and then the outputs wouldn't be on this part of the harness, but the added 9, this one is 14, so it's 5 millimeters thinner, which is nicer, again, because it probably would be a lot smaller if we didn't have to add all those extra wires, extra cylinder, extra injector, then on top of that all the inputs for the sensors. But it's coming out really nice. The factory harness runs this way, and it's mounted right here to the transmission pan. I'm going to have a bracket right here installed, hidden right here when it's all, rake hemmed up and, ran really nicely. It'll be hidden much easier because we have these big fans here. And even with the factory card, kind of like when you try to get up there, if you ever blow off an intake pipe or whatever, you're basically trying to get between there and the rad support. So this will hide the bay, save up some space. But yeah, it's coming out really nice.
Definitely taken up a lot more time than I originally anticipated, but can't rush something that's gonna it's gonna overall make everything a lot nicer and simpler. We have to wire in the secondary knock sensor and turbo speed. That's also going to be on a shielded wire, very similar, like just like this on a turbo, because some people wire them up with just regular standard wire, and I guess they get a lot of noise interference in the wire. So some people recommend shielded, some people don't. Since I'm running a whole new harness, I just went with shielded. Hopefully that eliminates an issue. We made a lot of progress. As you guys see, I know this is not like the most exciting video and everything, but I think it's coming out really nice. I know it kind of looks like a lot of wiring because we just have a lot of stuff, laying around. And some of the things I wanted to keep in place so that I know how to route them around it. I did that the first time where I removed everything, and I know when I started to route the wires, when we put stuff back on, I was like, darn, like the wire was too short because it had to go around something. I keep putting the intake pipe back on to measure, and then the other thing is the original harness actually was, I don't know if, because people have worked on the car before, this is going to be for the boost controller. I'm going to run this, and we're going to mount the MAC valve right here on the firewall. But the original harness actually sat on top of this black cover here. Now, we have now the harness inside. So once everything's cleaned up and everything's ready, you won't see any of this. This will all be really nice. And it's really nice because, again, we don't have the ECU anymore. We don't have the adapter box anymore. It saves a lot of space. And, George, when we put the motor back in, is going to make all these rubber hoses. We're going to make them all AN, really clean this whole setup up. Because, again, we just used whatever we had. But, yeah, a lot of planning has gone into this. I would say the hardest thing about making a harness is honestly planning. Because, once you run it, you're like, darn, I could have done this different. That's what a lot of the thought process went to make this one a lot better. And so far, it's coming out really, really good. Everything is saving a lot of space, coming out nicer. Like just by doing the twist and all that, this little braid here, it's and routing everything in a more complex way. It definitely, saves room. I've made everything a little bit longer because, we want to have space with the engine movement, but also if we need to change it or, run it differently, what's the name? Once we put the intake manifold back on and it's a lot shorter, or, we need more, or needs to be run in a different location, we can recut this and recrimp it. It's really easy. It's not that hard. I bought doubles of everything, so we're good to go. One thing we are waiting on is we have the signal wires for the ignition coils. This is all the signal wires run here. How you see it with this braid here. We have to run power and ground. I'm waiting for 14 gauge wiring to come in. Just because that's what we're going to run for the powers on the ignition coil. Some people say they run 18. Some people said they run 16. We ran 14 before, and just want to make sure we give these coils as much power as possible. Even though they don't take a lot of power usage, these are actually pretty low amp when they test them. So they fire them at pretty low milliseconds compared to like some other coils, like other older style. But yeah, a lot of improvements coming. I've been working on this day and night. I know we don't give as many updates lately, but because a lot of the things I've been really doing is really thinking about it, making an Excel sheet, really getting all the planning done, so that when we do run the harness, it comes out a lot better. I wish we had the rate cam here because it would look so much better when it's heat shrink. But if you guys saw how the original factory harness was run on your cars, like if you have an RS3 versus this harness, this is way, way thinner. For example, the injector harness on the factory RS3 is 15.2 millimeters thick. This one is 5.7 millimeters thick, and we're using better gauge wiring, better quality wiring, and it's still thinner, so it just makes it a lot more convenient. Overall, it's coming out really nice. I can't wait till when we we get this started this week. The next video will be definitely 100% started. Yeah, I can't wait to do it. And then we heat shrink it, and you can see the overall, and we finally wrap it for the last time because everything's going to look really, really nice. Right now it looks nice to me, but there's definitely room for improvement. That's it, guys. I've been working on this day and night. Sorry for the lack of updates, but been working on this. This is not the most exciting video out there, but I hope a lot of you guys like the information that we're providing because I'm learning along the way. This is my first time ever doing such a big job of a complete harness on an RS3. With all these modules that need to talk to each other.
on to the next video, guys. Gonna keep pinning and crimping, and hopefully in the next video we will have this thing firing and running on all 6 cylinders with all 24 valves and all that. So later, Malakas.